Hey guys, Jay Anthony, welcome back to the show, peoples. So today we got an interesting little video to go on, and this is me being a plagiarist. I stole this inspiration from somebody else. Somebody that I really think you guys should check out, and I actually checked with him and asked him if it was alright if I spread word of his channel. So that gentleman is Paul Thorpe. I'm going to put a link in the description below for his channel. He's a watch dealer based in the UK, and he's got some really good information about his whole history and selling watches, and I think he's got some great insight, especially into Rolexes. So I'm doing a plug for him. He did not ask me to do this. Honestly, this is all my undoing. I just was really impressed with his work, so I'm going to throw that in there. You know, YouTube is a community, and I want to support people I think are making great content. So what he inspired me a bit, and this is something that I really think we should talk about, is kind of the Rolex hype and being careful how you don't overpay for watches. I gotta be careful because I feel like I'm getting really boring in these videos again, so let's see if I can try to keep this interesting. But hey, so he was talking about the new Rolex ceramic Daytona, which is model number 116500, I think. Correct me if I'm wrong. Anyway, that watch, I believe, retail in the US is right around $12,000, somewhere in that range. Oh, sorry, wristwatch check. Hamilton Trent automatic, Rolex GMT. If you have them both, why not wear them both? And I've seen some of these other channels are talking about fashion of what clothes they're wearing in the video. If you guys are curious, this is Versace, I think. And cufflinks, every guy needs a shirt with cufflinks, right? They scrape on desks, they're a pain in the ass. But for those of you that are curious, they have ships on them, old sailing ships. Anyway, boring crap, sorry about the tangent. I gotta please everybody in my audience, and I'll undo a little bit of my buttons too to add to the fake sex appeal. Tangent. So anyway, they had the Rolex Daytona out. They just showed this at was it Basel this year. And long story short, you know, Rolex is going to ceramic bezels on all their watches, which I personally think is really cool. You know, the new GMT Masters, even, they don't have aluminum bezels anymore. They have ceramic. You know, in theory, it's more durable. I personally prefer the looks of the ceramic. That said, funny enough, even on the GMTs, these non-ceramic ones are actually worth more in some cases than the newer ceramic ones on the secondhand market. How that worked, I guess I don't know. Point being is I'm getting on a tangent, but here's why this is relevant. So every time Rolex introduces a new model, you know, obviously there's a lot of hype when it first comes out. Everybody wants to get a hold of it. And the Daytona is one of those models that Rolex is really good at limiting demand on, or limiting supply on, and building up demand for. And you know, if you've watched my channel, obviously I've owned a Daytona, and this is something that I really think is present because I was very careful when I bought my Daytona. Sorry, I'm messing with my microphone here. I was very careful when I bought my Daytona because there was so much hype about that watch, the stainless steel version of the Daytona, and I had the 116520. I think so. Anyway, with the 4130 movement, long story short, there was a lot of demand for that watch, and it was actually ridiculous some of the hoops you had to go through to get one of those watches when they first came out. And when I bought my watch, which was even right about 2011, 2012, there was still quite a bit of hype for the watch, but when they first came out, it was absurd. I think they first came out, they were retail about 7,000-ish in the US, and they slowly crept it up over the years. But the thing that was just ridiculous is I went to like an authorized dealer when I was still living in Michigan, and it's like they wouldn't even sell you one at retail. You had to be like on their premier customer benefits program, and you had to spend like $30,000 a year or something in their store. It was something like total bullshit is really what it was. And they basically could just, you know, milk it because there was not enough supply to meet the demand. So what happened is the watch may have retailed at the time for $7,000, and it crept up to now it's $12,000 for a Daytona. But people were charging astronomical fees for these watches, especially used ones. It was crazy. So the good news is if you were one of those fortunate people that didn't get dicked around with your local dealer and was able to get one at retail, you were instantly in the money. And you know, the first couple, you could have had that watch for several years and then sold it, beaten to hell for more money than you paid for it, which was great for you. The problem is that eventually these things all end up on the market, and then once there is enough supply to meet the demand, then there's actually potential for oversupply, and then the prices plummet. So what happened with like the Daytona that I had is now happening with the newer ceramic model as well. So this is a watch, the newer ceramic one retails for like $12,000, I believe. And if you go online like eBay, there's people spending like $16,000, $17,000, $18,000 for one of these freaking watches. And it's absolute absurdity. And I know you guys are going to say, well, it's an horological treasure and all this bullshit. I mean, don't get me wrong. The Daytona is a great watch. And if my watch had not had so many freaking problems with it, I'd still own it today. It was one of my holy grail watches. I love the Daytona. Was it worth $7,000? Sure. Was it worth, $12,000 they're asking for it? You know what? I think it is. Not so much in its materialist, but not so much in the makeup of what you're getting, but it is a really cool piece. It has a great history behind it, and it's honestly always going to command the money it's selling for now and then some. The problem is if you buy into that hype and you just have to have one of these ceramic bezel Daytonas and you go out there and you spend $16,000, $17,000, $18,000, you're a moron. Because what happens is, again, the market's going to eventually catch up. It's not going to happen this year, it's not going to happen next year, but a couple of years from now, all these watches are going to flood into the market eventually, and they're going to be selling for what they're actually worth. And how do we know this is going to happen? Because you can look at the Daytona that I used to own. When I bought that watch, I got a really good deal at the time, and I paid a little over $8,000 for it, which in some respects, I had a P serial, so the first owner actually sold their watch at a profit more than likely because they did not pay $1,000 for that watch. The flip side is the guy that I sold it to turned around and sold it in I think a week for $10,200, somewhere in there. So they did pretty good on that damn watch. The problem is within 6-7 months of me selling that watch, and I kind of had a feeling this was going to happen too, is that there became a point where all of a sudden a bunch of Daytonas were showing up on the market. And when I sold my watch too, I also noticed that there was starting to be a lot more availability on these watches. When I first bought a Daytona, it was very difficult to find one. I mean, I walked into tons and tons and tons of authorized Rolex dealers, and they all laughed at me when I said I wanted a stainless Daytona because they couldn't get a hold of them. They really couldn't. And the only place to find them was on the secondhand market. And very much as is going on now with these ceramic ones is the dealers that had them just are asking absolutely absurd prices for them. I mean, it wasn't uncommon to see, a really old one selling for $12,000, $13,000. It was absurd. And like I said, there was no way in hell I was going to pay that money for it because I knew eventually the market would catch up and they would not sustain that value. So I got really lucky. I found a dealer at the time, I want to say it was in Atlanta, Georgia, and he had one, and I was able to negotiate with him by making him an all-cash offer because I guess somebody else was going to pay him with credit or something stupid. I got it for $8,000 or $8,500, somewhere around there. And that was a pretty good price. But the thing is now if you go to a website like bobswatches.com where you kind of track trending sales on eBay or some other places, I got out of my watch for basically what I paid for it, which was right about $8,000. But if I'd been a moron and I'd spent $12,000 or $13,000 on that watch, I would have taken a $5,000 hit. And now since the market has even more inventory, and now that everybody's all excited about the ceramic version, my version, the one I had, those prices have gone down. And now, if I walked into a normal dealer and wanted to trade one in the United States, they might give me $6,500 for it. So it's gone down another $1,500+ since I sold it. And I sold mine 2 years ago. You guys can check out why I sold my Rolex video if you're curious. I can't remember the exact date, but point being, the market's only even further become more saturated and prices have gone down even more. So I'm talking too much, but here's kind of the takeaway. If you buy a new Rolex model that's super hyped, Rolex is really clever. They're very good at limiting the supply on some of these watches that have high demand. And what happens is, especially on the secondhand market, people jack the prices up to stratospheric numbers. And they'll sustain that for a couple of years. They probably will. But eventually, enough are going to show up on the used market that if you go to sell it, you're going to get screwed. Because you're basically going to have a market now where everybody can get a hold of one of these things, and you're going to lose thousands upon thousands upon thousands of dollars. So the only way you can win in this game is if A, you find some buddy of yours at a Rolex dealer and you can pay retail for one, which is, if you're buying a new ceramic, that's the only thing you should be doing. You're a moron if you're paying over retail, because eventually it's going to happen. The market's going to become saturated, just like it did with the last generation. And then what's going to happen, because this is the way Rolexes work, the models that have been discontinued, like right now the Zeniths have gone up a little bit. The Zenith El Primero movement Daytonas have gone up. The ones from the 70s are just stratospheric now, which I don't like those watches personally. I'm sorry to say. I'm sure you guys love them. I just think they're eh. And I'm sure, the 4130P serial that I had eventually will go through the roof too, because it's a transitional model and it's the first year of the in-house movement and all that crap. But if you're like me and you have this obsession with buying new watches and you don't keep watches for more than 4 or 5 years, don't buy into the hype and go spend a ton of money on one of these watches. The other one that I think right now is pretty stupid is, the Batman GMTs. Really, really cool watch. You buy one at retail, I think they're super cool and I think they're a good deal. But if you buy into the hype and you pay way over retail for one, you're gonna get screwed. You know, the siege rollers were the same thing. When those things first came out, people were charging absurd amount of money on premiums for those things, and now eventually, I mean, I remember people were paying like $14,000, $15,000 for a siege roller deep sea, which is just absolute absurdity. And now you can pick up a siege roller deep sea for like $7,000. So to any people that bought one of those, I mean, congratulations, you're a moron. You know, I'm such a mean person. Anyway, so again, what's the point of this thing? Go check out Paul Thorpe. Again, he's not telling me to say this. I just think he's got some great content. You want to get an insight from a dealer, check him out. I want to support fellow YouTube creators that have great content. He's a cool guy. But again, don't buy into hype. Wait till models become somewhat saturated on the market and buy it at a fair price, or if it's still a brand new model, don't pay over retail. I mean, that's kind of the way it is, because the reality is that Rolexes do hold their value, and they tend to go up in value with time, especially stainless sport models. But if you buy into the hype and you pay way over list, after a couple years, if you decide to sell that watch, you're going to be massively in the hole. And granted, there are people that buy these watches that to them $7,000 isn't a lot of money. Think of all the great watches you could buy with $7,000. You could go buy a Jaeger-LeCoultre Grande. You could go buy a used Patek Philippe Calatrava. I mean, there's plenty of other ways that you could spend that money. You could buy yourself some nice Rolex sport models. So that's my advice to you. Thank you so much. Here's the part where I do stuff I don't like, which is ask you for your help and support. So I suck at doing this, but the reality is that I really want to grow this channel and I want you guys to help me. So if you thought this content was helpful, if you think people would benefit from my insight, if I'm being kind to myself, do me a favor and help spread the word. If you could please do me a favor, subscribe if you're not already subscribed so you can stay tuned to my future content. If you want to follow me on social media, I'll put some links below to my social media. And if you feel that there's friends of yours or family or just people you know in general that would benefit from my message, please help spread the word as well. I would love to grow this channel into something much bigger and give you guys an insight into watches. And not just watches as well, but luxury goods in general. And we can expand on that later. But thank you so much for watching as always. Really appreciate it. I hope you guys are having an awesome day. And I'll leave it here.